Welcome to Implant Outlook, a podcast dedicated to the implant printing industry. Welcome back. Today I have with me someone who knows a few things about successful implants. Lois Ritarossi is president of High Rock Strategies, which provides strategic consulting services for companies and organizations to help them with strategic planning and developing marketing and operational strategies. She has worked with a number of implants at utilities, banks, insurance companies, and healthcare organizations to help them with right sizing, optimizing workflows, and reducing costs. So I'm happy to have her here today to talk about some of these best practices for implants. Welcome, Lois.
Hi, Bob. It's a pleasure to be with you here today.
Yeah, and it's great to talk to you again. So, what's your background and what led you into the consulting business?
So, I started my career in publishing and soon moved into sales and marketing roles in financial services, large financial services companies, both on the investment side and the banking side. I then actually worked in direct marketing, selling complex direct mail and fulfillment programs. I was recruited and went into transactional printing at what was then a division of DST, which after many mergers is now Broadridge. And I managed large accounts when, digital printing technologies were changing dramatically. And then I owned a company that we did complex database marketing. All of our clients were in financial services. We brokered the print, both offset and emerging digital print at the time. And I sold my interest in that company in 2005 and began consulting as I thought would be the best fit to leverage my operational knowledge, my sales and marketing skills, and leadership skills to work with companies, both those in printing and mailing, those who OEMs and equipment manufacturers, as well as software companies. And it's been a good ride for 20 years.
Nice. So yeah, you have a lot of digital print background. So in terms of implants, I mean, how many implants have you worked with over the years?
I have worked with about 20 implants in the last 20 years. Some years lots. I also work with print service providers, commercial printers, and some publishing companies as well.
Right. Yeah. What led you to the implant industry?
Well, I think the implant industry has unique needs that are, similar but different than commercial printers and print service providers and direct mail companies.
Yep.
And often there are a few key people that understand printing and operations, but there's lots of places in the organization where there's a big disconnect in print and mail and workflow and postal and compliance and data security. And, there's a lot of siloed needs to really have a consultant come in and take more a holistic approach as to what's the value to the organization and what does the organization need and how can this implant thrive.
Right. Because as implants know very well, their bosses don't always understand what printing is. And so somebody like you, I suppose, would be able to explain that a little bit better to the top management in the company.
I find often in our engagements, no matter how we became engaged, myself and a few colleagues, obviously, that I work with, that often we end up being translators. We translate for technical teams. Well, why do we need to automate workflow? We translate for senior leaders and financial teams on how this implant is cost effective or could lower their cost, for example, and reduce operational expense or expand capabilities. And then we translate for other departments like marketing on why they should use their implant versus that commercial printer down the road and how they can also, serve those end customers better by leveraging internal capabilities. So often there's a lot of disconnects with the why and the how and in really understanding the mix of capabilities that a well-run implant can provide.
Yeah, it's a constant struggle, as many implants know, getting their departments to actually use them and not send work to outside. Well, when consulting jobs come to you, is it usually the director of the implant who contacts you, or someone in the company trying to decide how to cut costs in print and mail?
So it's a real mix. We certainly have been engaged by, operations managers and leaders. Hey, I saw you speak at a conference or I read your blog and maybe you could help me. Certainly. Certainly have been engaged at senior levels like directors of finance and operations or IT if the implant sort of sometimes rolls up under IT. And sometimes they're like, this is costing us too much money. Like, what can we do to cut the
Yeah.
expenses? Um, And often I get referred in, like maybe a hardware, maybe an OEM wants to sell inkjet or cut sheet or wide format, and it's not the cost justification. They need something else beyond. And as the consultant, I can help them with workflow or strategic planning, or a software company. Like, we know we need to a software company that, does XYZ, or web to print, or CRM, or workflow automation. And beyond that software solution, the software company will refer us and say, well, you may need Lois as a consultant to really help with the other side of the solution. So we get introduced in various ways, and we certainly work at multiple levels, ultimately trying to help with, optimization and improvement in capabilities.
Yeah. Well, I know one thing you do is evaluate the appropriate size and structure of a print and mail operation. So, how do you go about that? I mean, what factors do you look at?
So I follow a methodology that I perfected again, with my colleague Mark Fallon at the Berkshire Company, when we collaborate and work together on operational assessments. And we really look at people, process, and technology. And we look at it from a multi-lens approach. We look at physical workflow. How do things, paper and envelopes and people and how do things move through? And we look at the electronic side, starting from data and orders. So how do you look at it? And then we often work backwards. Well, from the loading dock, and how do things leave the building in terms of what are all the steps? So, and we then really do a deep dive assessment, and whether it's, inbound mail, outbound mail, print operations, fulfillment, kitting, promotional products, wide format, all of those things. And what are the factors that will, is it efficient? How could it be more efficient? Compliance, automation, what are our single points of failure, be they people or, a single piece of equipment that, is really old or legacy. We look at accuracy in the work, we look at rework, we look at work in process, and then we look at postal optimization, because that's another sort of silo where there's not a lot of people who
Mm,
really have knowledge and expertise on postal, and it's changing rapidly in these environments.
yeah, and I could see that there is a great value in having an outside person come in and look at this fresh, because an implant manager might say, "Yeah, well, I could do all those things too." But I mean, so why do you think it's better to bring in somebody who's from the
Well,
outside?
what I bring as a consultant is that outside the fishbowl perspective. So I'm not going to have the lens on of, well, this is how we always did it, or some department requires us to do it this manual way, or we do special handling because this person likes to run the equipment this way. So I can really take a wide lens look and see, are all the people providing functions that, and is there further optimization needed? Are we using all the tools we have? We often see good hardware and software has been purchased that are being underutilized for
Yeah.
lack of training, lack of documentation, fear of change. I like doing it the old way, and all of the above. So we can, without being attached to the people, process, or technology, we can talk about best in class. We can talk about best practices. We can talk about AI enablement and things that they may not have knowledge of internally. And we can really bring the expertise of a industry perspective of what are implants like you doing, even if they're in the same vertical market or in different vertical markets.
Yep, and when you talk about underutilized software, I've heard that a lot, and I've even been to shops where they have web to print software, but they're not using it because it was whatever, too hard to figure out. They paid for it, but now it's just sitting there. Well, I mean, what are some common suggestions that you might make to an implant for improving workflow efficiency? Are there things you see that
So the typical things we see is lots of manual people with institutional knowledge touching and doing things, sorting, compiling, kidding, whatever that is. And so the concept of workflow automation and using software to automate manual steps, sometimes people think it's just not worth it. And we will demonstrate to them how and why it is worth it. We've seen more recently in the last few years changes around compliance, data security, cyber attacks and cyber breaches, and a real need to have more physical security in buildings with people that are touching things that might have PII or PHI. and electronic security of files and who has access, and where are files, how are they saved, how are they deleted and purged. So we've seen a lot of high level recommendations around compliance. The other thing that we see on the mailing side is we make many recommendations around piece level integrity and file based processing, which have both been around for many, many years. But on the mailing side, mail is often evolved in implants, aside from some of the largest ones that truly are, transactional printers. And the importance of piece level integrity and file based processing to again track every piece of mail and every envelope and use barcodes so that you really have a handle of what's on the floor, what's out the door, what's been submitted to the U.S. Postal Service or third party shipper. Those are some of the big
Mm.
things.
So in mail, do you usually encounter in plants handling mail that really need to fix some of their procedures? I mean, is it really common that an implant wouldn't have it all down perfectly?
Yes, it is
Mhm.
common that they may be handling medium and large volumes of mail, and we may find
Yeah.
some gaps around. So, siloed data from old mainframes that send them files that they print with no counts. Like, well, we're going to get this job today, but we don't know if it's 1,000 records or 5,000 records. So when you start out with not knowing, it's really hard to have data integrity. And we're able to go back and help that implant justify why an IT resource might need to do some programming so that they get better data at the beginning so that they really can close the loop for tracking. So that's a common one.
Mm.
Um, Often we see a, a lot of manual steps in insertion and not keeping good track of reprints. How do we make sure we don't have duplicates that go in the mail?
Right.
Things that happen once the machine is, using suction or vacuums, and, mail gets crumpled,
Mhm.
things require reprints, and being able to provide industry expertise on how best to handle that and streamline operations so that you have integrity, end-to-end integrity when it comes to mailing every piece and every envelope.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I can see a lot of room for improvement in the mail area. And I know that one thing you do is you recommend technologies because there might be gaps in production. So, what are some of the technologies that you find implants are often lacking?
We do see a lot of underutilized web to print, as
Mm.
it indicated, and often we see homegrown systems that have been neglected, like they worked 5 or 8 or 10 or 20 years ago, and the programmer who wrote it is
Yeah.
gone, and no one else knows how to change it, and or they bought software and they really didn't put in the time and effort on training. And often it's not the training in the implant; it's the training of those users, especially with the web to print. Workflow automation on the front end, there's lots of great software out there. I could name 10 companies, of how do we fix front end planning, scheduling, estimating, imposition. Um, the OEMs and all the software companies have a variety of what are typically excellent software. On the inkjet side, we see lack of use of inkjet estimating, ink utilization, and before and after, so that you really have a better handle on costs. Um, and one of the biggest things that we see is extreme manual processing on certified mail and certificate of mailing. And there are really some great software options that fully automate those tasks, eliminate green cards and logs, and getting stamps at the post office for certified mail, that also allow better audit tracking and reporting to that person who has made the effort to send a piece using certificate of mail or certified mail. So there's a lot of great solutions there that seem to be not well known in the implant world.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of room for software improvement at implants. Um, well, that's very good to know. So, what are some of the common workflow bottlenecks you see at implants where there's opportunities to streamline?
We still see that there's bottlenecks in, what was traditionally called pre-press, pre-flight. How do I get that initial file ready for however my front end software or DFE wants to ingest it and process it and rip it and, send it to a digital device, or, even if it's an offset device still. Um, so I think on that end, and then finishing and software. So we've had automated JDF and automated files from the various, types of inserting, finishing, and bindery equipment. And again, there's been slow to adopt unless you are really a large shop doing a lot of the same kind of work, be it books or kitting or, things like that. And the bottlenecks are often in finishing. Like the print
Yeah.
has gotten faster and faster, and the roll fed inkjet has gotten faster and faster. And some of the inserters have gotten faster, but when you look at bindery equipment and stapling and all the other things that have to happen in a bindery function, those are often much slower and still require a manual setup. So we've seen, in the last couple years at the various trade shows and conferences, we've seen a lot of automation of finishing equipment as tenured operators are retiring, younger people in the workforce coming in that don't have that knowledge of a machine operation and like fine tuning and fixing whatever that finishing machine is, especially in bindery. Inserters, fine, those are fully automated now and function with barcodes. But often implants can make medium-sized investments and really improve finishing when we look at the opportunity for inline finishing and just other pieces of automated equipment. And often the assessment will help them justify the cost of both the software change and then the device or machine or equipment that could make a difference for their operation.
Printing United Alliance is the leading member-based printing and graphic arts association in North America with over 70 years of history and more than 20,000 members worldwide. We're here to support printing professionals like you with the tools, resources, and information you need to grow your business, sharpen your skills, and expand your network. Whether you're a printer, supplier, student, or educator, we've built our community to serve everyone who's passionate about the future of print. An Alliance membership is a smart, cost-effective way to stay current on the latest trends, connect with industry leaders, and give your business the competitive edge it deserves. Head over to printing.org/membership to learn more about the memberships we offer. Let's move the printing industry forward together.
Yeah, finishing is where I would have guessed the bottlenecks would be as well, especially from what I've seen and heard. How open are the companies that you work with that have implants to improving the finishing? I mean, is that an area where they just don't maybe see the benefit and they're thinking more about, we need faster print speed? I don't know. Do you see them being open?
Well, I would say I've seen big investments in wide format and better laser cutting. You start hand cutting, hand stitching, hand
Yeah.
sewing, grommeting, and all the finishing in the wide format. And wow, Printing United this year and Printing United last year, I saw a lot of implants really seriously looking at better and automated finishing for wide format. On the
It's true.
document side where I spend a lot of my time, yeah, books and, kitting of booklets and all those types of things, I've seen great improvements. The implants that struggle the most are the ones that get a lot of ad hoc work, which is like take a college or a university,
Mhm.
like if it's K through 12, they have pretty consistent things that they do, and they offer their teachers and their curriculum people consistent finishing, document based, small booklet based. That can be streamlined. If you have a manufacturing company or a utility or marketing departments that just throw all kinds of ad hoc work, then often it's hard to justify a special piece of bindery equipment that might only use it once a month, right?
Yeah.
So it's that pull and could that piece of equipment do other things that would, allow an implant to say, yeah, it'll automate this monthly or quarterly job that's a nightmare that takes 4 days to finish for whatever reason, but perhaps that piece of equipment can do something else that can, so they can provide and demonstrate value to the organization by, using it in other ways.
Right. Yeah. Well, budgets are being cut everywhere, not just the implants budget, their customers' budgets. So they're looking very hard for ways to reduce expenses. So, what are some strategies that you would recommend to do that?
Yes, budget cuts are a topic, an ongoing topic,
Yeah.
a forever topic. So one thing that we recommend is there's a lot of resources out there for training. And having an operations team that is really thoroughly cross-trained, so people in print understand insertion and people in kitting and fulfillment understand pre-press or other things. So often what we uncover is You have risk to the organization, um, and what will end up being additional cost in rework or errors because of lack of training. And there's, the hardware and software companies, and there's industry resources, and there's obviously webinars and so much training that can mitigate risk. So those might not yet be hard dollars, but could potentially be hard dollars
Mhm.
if somebody makes a mistake, or, and we have to reprint or rework. I think the other thing in terms of budgets is the ability for, especially on the print side, equipment that was normally like, we have this printer for checks, and we have this printer for transactional, and we have this printer for books. Not true anymore,
Yeah.
because all of the digital technologies from almost all of the OEMs have the capability to do multiple things. So we've seen inkjet transformation taking work from offset, black and white work, and full color work all can be done on one device now. And that one device might cost more money initially as a capital investment, but ultimately that one device could replace two or three. So when you look at service and maintenance, yes, there's some capital, and we got to get that capital budget approval. And we can now have one piece of equipment that's faster, that can meet the color and quality demands for lots of different jobs that we typically would have run on multiple types of equipment. So looking at cost savings from not just how we do it today and total cost of operation, but what other capabilities, if we make the right investments in hardware and software, that can provide value and ultimately labor savings. And demonstrating the labor savings, that's also often a cost that is sometimes underlooked, right?
Yep.
Because it's just payroll, it just goes to that other budget. But often there's real opportunities there for people to be more efficient if they have better capabilities with the tools that they're using.
Yep. And I think, when you're talking about modern equipment being able to handle multiple jobs, I would think inkjet is probably one of those technologies that you're pointing people towards because of its ability to do so much.
Absolutely. That inkjet has been a game changer both for offset, for what was color toner, and a cost, uptime, reliability, and less service.
Yeah.
Again, from all of the OEMs out there, that the technology has dramatically changed what you can do with a digital press.
Right. Well, so based on your work across different industries, what habits or practices would set a successful implant apart from a struggling one?
Yeah, so I would say successful implants typically really understand their cost. They know what it costs to produce different types of jobs and different type of applications. Absolutely. They have implemented effective cross training. There's not only one person who can produce that special monthly or quarterly job, three or four people know how to do it. So they've cross pollinated, and they've allowed certain people to become leaders, supervisory role and leaders and subject matter experts within their own teams, but they have a culture of sharing knowledge. So that to me also sets them apart. And then regularly having communications with customers, whoever their internal and external customers are, that are not about jobs. Like having communications about business goals, business objectives, what else is important to the organization if they're in healthcare or they're a bank or they're a utility or a college or university. That those are some of the best practices that we often make recommendations on, and when we see them implemented, then we can say that they're implementing best practices, but because they have taken on communications and training and cross training, and they just have a deeper industry knowledge, especially on the mail side, as all things postal are a lot of changes in the last few years,
Hmm.
lots of increased cost, and being able to have knowledge around postal if you're doing mail is also a best practice of leading in successful implants.
Yeah, some of the same best practices that we focus on and try to urge implants to always make sure they're doing. So what are some common mistakes you've seen at implants, either in printing or mailing operations that maybe you could point out?
Some of the common mistakes I see, Bob, are that they don't know it's being outsourced.
Yeah.
I mean, some have first right of refusal, and they really put in smart structures with procurement teams and, high users of print and mail promotional products, but not really knowing what's outsourced and why. People might be basing information on decisions that were made 3, 5, 10 years ago on why things are outsourced. So helping implants demonstrate value by asking the hard questions and what's, going and whatever it takes to get that data and the knowledge and those meetings. I've seen this is the way we do it philosophies that have gotten implants, in trouble. Then, other departments have, outsourced work just because there's a reluctance to change. I've seen fully depreciated offset equipment that shouldn't be running jobs that is because
Yeah.
this is how we do it. Um, Unwillingness to move to the cloud because, those decisions might not be in the implant. They might be in IT or corporate data security or whatever.
Yeah.
But ultimately, being able to influence why maybe tools like imposition tools are often in the cloud now and other, tool sets that are in the cloud and why that's valuable and how to make it work within data structures and security structures so that, those IT gods can support the implant more effectively. And sometimes those are just hard, difficult conversations to have.
Yeah. Well, so how do you approach getting buy-in from leadership when recommending any of these changes, knowing that in an implant that leadership doesn't know printing?
Yeah, getting buy-in from leadership, um, it's situational. I mean, certainly there's some important things to understand. What are the organizational goals? What are the organizational big projects that are important? What do they measure? Because what they measure in healthcare is different than what they measure in banking, is different what they measure at a university, right? So understanding how the implant can demonstrate value, it's not that, well, we produce EOBs or we produce welcome letters. I'll give those as two examples. It's the why. Like, what does that welcome letter mean to a college freshman when they walk into their dorm room, for example, or a new customer when they get that policy or some sort? So, what we try to do is help the implant frame their capabilities around value to the organization about what the organization measures and what's important. So, we've seen attitudes and metrics change around customer experience, and being able to tie, we do this, we do it well, we do it at this cost, and this is the impact, and here's how it impacts customer experience. Because those are just not natural conversations for someone who's an operations manager. They might be two or three levels disconnected from that. Well, what does it mean to customer experience? Um, but those conversations are important to have. And when senior leaders see operational leaders who understand and can speak about corporate goals or organizational goals, that just creates the bridge to alignment. They may never understand print and mail. They may always think, well, why are we doing this stuff down in the basement? But if the operations manager can say, we do these things for these departments and here's the cost impact, but more importantly, here's the customer experience or retention or acquisition, things that what matters to the organization. So it's framing it in a business conversation because that's all leaders care about.
So, Lois, what kind of recommendations do you have for implants to improve their communication with their customers?
Yeah, often, a lot of the communication is around job specifics, job details. When is the file coming? What we encourage operations managers and customer service teams to do is to use best practices in the commercial print industry and the direct mail industry, where they have these regular meetings that might be called a business review, it might be called a planning meeting. It doesn't matter what it's called, but it's the opportunity to have that meeting monthly, quarterly, whatever the frequency that makes sense for the amount of work to talk about everything the implant can do. So you give them the highlights on what went well with their job, what could be done differently that might improve production processing, but spending time talking about asking that customer about their business goals beyond specific printing and mailing jobs, and asking that customer about what's important or what's changing. Marketing teams are under a lot of pressure to change things. Compliance and regulatory requirements are changing. HR department, if you serve HR or legal, there's a lot of change going on in the industry. And just taking the time to say, we're going to have a regular meeting and we're going to update you on our new capabilities. These are new things we can do. Because my one trick question always is when I do an operational assessment is, do all of your clients know everything you could do for them?
Mm.
And rarely ever is the answer yes, because They do different things for different departments, for different customers, and taking the time to have communications and planning meetings when you talk about other capabilities, that's when people have the aha moment. "Oh, you could help us with?"
Right. Yeah.
So those are the great conversations, and those are things we recommend that really go to the heart of improving communications with customers and expanding the amount of skills and capabilities you can provide to that customer as an expert, and for them to understand everything that the implant can do.
Yeah, I think that's really important to communicate better with your customers. And I have seen implants that just kind of wait for the next job and don't have that communication. The successful ones actually set meetings, like you had said, and even maybe join groups that are around the university that have nothing to do with printing, but they become a member just so that they can meet more people and learn about what their print needs might be. And then at that point, bring up what they can do to help them. So yeah, communication is very important. Well, any last advice that you would have for implants out there to help them be more successful in their operations?
Yeah, I would say embrace change. So as humans, change is the hardest thing we do.
Mm,
It really is. And I've seen extraordinary leaders within the IPMA and in the implant community, embrace change. And often some of the hardest thing is to get everyone aligned on that. AI is here. Look at your good vendors and partners, be they hardware and software. Ask them what they're doing with AI and AI embedded tools and what could it mean. Take a crawl, walk, run approach, but start now because AI is changing. It's not just it's not just for sales and marketing. It's for operations. It's for contracts. It's for pre-press. It's for leveraging, looking at more data and making better decisions.
right.
And that's what, as humans, we can do the best. We can make better decisions when we have better data, and that's what AI can provide. And I would say, being active in the industry, so in the print and mailing communities and the associations that support the industry, there's a wealth of knowledge and there's lots of people who want to share information, and really scheduling time with your staff on their professional development and AI initiatives in your organization and beyond your organization where you can bring new ideas, and just getting more people comfortable with change management. I think that those would be the goals that I would recommend as we look at 2026 and beyond.
Yeah, that is good advice. And I know there are several events throughout the year, and I've seen you at them, and especially Printing United Expo. And do you go to the IBMA conference? I think I've seen you there at times.
I will be speaking at the IPMA
Yeah,
conference next year. I'll be speaking at the National Postal Forum. I will be at Printing United. Some of the OEMs have their own smaller customer events, which can be great places to exchange information with,
yeah.
people who have the same kind of operational and business challenges. So yeah, get out of your own shop and meet other people face to face, and that's where some of the best adult learning happens from other adults.
Yes, indeed. Well, good. Well, I look forward to seeing you at some of these events throughout 2026. And I'm sure that some of our implant listeners to the podcast may be interested in talking with you there.
Thank you.
So, Lois, it's been a pleasure talking with you today. And just want to wish you the best of luck as you continue to help implants improve their operations.
I look forward to working with some new implant opportunities next year. And I appreciate you taking the time, Bob.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to the Implant Outlook Podcast.